Polygon, which I haven't really watched their videos. Some of their articles a bit okay. So here we go. They're saying, what does Columbo have to do with Ace Attorney? Which I do know is one of the inspirations, along with Perry Mason, for how it was written.
So I've been watching some classic mystery shows due to looking for something comfortable to watch. You know, like Murder, She Wrote, Poirot, Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century.
Wait, how did he pronounce that?
Shows due to looking for something comfortable to watch. You know, like Murder, She Wrote, Poirot,
Poirot? Bruh. It's literally in the show. Hercule Poirot. Or if you want to anglicize it, like Chief Inspector Japp, it's Pyro, not Poirot or whatever he was saying. You make sure to go to the Poirot or Pyro. Alright, I immediately dismissed it. Didn't pronounce the title right, even though he says he's watched it.
Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century. But out of all of the mystery shows I've watched, there's been one show that's caught me red-handed. Columbo. Columbo is a detective show from the 70s that feels less like a cop show and more like a drifter solving murders and leaving to the next crime town. But something about this Ronin detective show really struck me. Every episode of Columbo just reminded me of the first case in Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. I began to wonder if the show had more in common with my favorite game than just a schlubby guy. I love you, Dick. Columbo was created by Richard Livingston and William Link in 1971. It was very different from other mystery shows for one important reason. Instead of keeping the audience in the dark until the very end, the murder is revealed at the beginning of the episode. This inverted mystery concept dates back to the case of Oscar Brodsky by R. Austin Freeman in 1912, but it was still a pretty novel idea for a TV show in the 70s. Each episode of Columbo follows the same formula. In the first act, we witness the murderer commit the perfect crime. The killer is usually someone in power, like a politician, studio executive, or even a scientist.
He's showing the magic episode that you shared lock on.
In the second act, Columbo enters and begins what William Link calls the duel. You know, the stuff we think police detectives do in real life. Alibi checking, pavement pounding, questioning witnesses. The third and final act is the pop, or the big breakthrough that allows Columbo to solve the case. This often involves Columbo catching the murderer in a contradiction and becoming so cornered that they can't help but confess to the crime.
And I thought I'd perform the perfect murder. Perfect murder, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. There is no such thing as a perfect murder. That's just an illusion.
Oh, I pause it with his eyes half closed. I was just thinking as well, the last episode really took me through a ride with Columbo that I was watching, because I'm only in season 1 still, where he was stuck on being able to catch him. There was hardly any evidence at all for the fella, the general. And then it's right at the end where he goes on that tiny detail and turns it around, very much like Ace Attorney.
The first turnabout is the first case in the Phoenix Wright series, and it uses the same
So spoilers.
inverted
If
mystery
you don't know.
style of storytelling. The player sees Frank Sawit committing murder by Thinker. He believes he can pin his crime on Larry Butts, as he was the last person to meet with the victim. Sawit enters the trial as a witness. The trial of Mr. Butts continues as Phoenix Wright cross-examines Sawit's testimony and begins the duel. Phoenix Wright works through the testimony and uses contradictory evidence to prove that Frank Sawit was the murderer all along. Frank Sawit confesses to the crime and pop. The inverted mystery style works well for this case since it's effectively the tutorial. The goal isn't to figure out who did it, it's to gather enough evidence to be able to prove that they did it. Later in the game, the dynamic switches back to the classic whodunit style mystery. Still makes me wonder how Columbo and other mystery stories influence a Japanese studio known for zombie and fighting games. For that, we would have to figure out
Okay, I'll talk about them changing it up here.
which is back to the classic whodunit style mystery.
They switch back and forth all the time. For example, even in Dual Destinies with the Clown Man, in the Yokai story especially, they showed who did it at the start. There's a lot of times in Ace Attorney where they show the murder at the start. And then it's just, okay, how do we get from point A to point B? Which still follows that formula. And then it's more like the exception is, oh, we don't know who the murderer is. How is it going to be revealed? Which worked really well, especially for the Phantom. Because that was where you're going, I don't know. And then it worked well for some of the harder cases, like Manfred von Karma was one of the biggest ones that it was going, we don't know who the killer is. And then suddenly, what? And then I wasn't following the train of thought either, so it took me so long to get that.
Still makes me wonder how Columbo and other mystery stories influence a Japanese studio known for zombie and fighting games. For that, we would have to figure out how Sherlock Holmes ended up in Japan, and not the 22nd century. Detective stories have been around since we stopped accepting murder as something that just happens. So, of course, the late 1800s. Sherlock Holmes made his debut in 1887 and went to Japan a few years later with a translation of The Man.
And then it will be a certain amount of time. Yeah, the 6 case was peak. It was
with
peak.
a twisted lip.
It
After
would be
the
the
turn of
best
the century,
case. Still.
Japan started translating the detective stories of Arthur Conan Doyle.
Also would have been a certain period of time after the general populace became literate.
G.K. Chesterton and Edgar Allan Poe in short magazines. One of the first Japanese authors published in these magazines was Taro Hirai, also known by his pen name Edogawa Ranpo, who wrote the 2-cent copper coin in 1923. Ranpo was at the forefront of Japanese mystery fiction and is considered the creator of the Hokkaku mystery. A Hokkaku mystery is a detective story that focuses mainly on the process of a criminal investigation and the fun that comes from trying to solve it yourself. Hokkaku mystery usually include diagrams, floor plans, and maps that give readers all the info they need to solve the mystery. In the years following World War II, writers refined...
That reminds me of Pyro. Pyro. Oh, now I'm thinking about it too much because he mispronounced it. I'm thinking about Pyro because a lot of that is really fun when you don't know who the killer is and you're trying to figure it out yourself as you're watching. Like, I don't know how he would watch the show and still say Pyro or whatever he said. It's weird.
The form, moving it further away from the simple whodunits that Doyle had popularized. In the 70s, Japanese writers began translating episodes of hit American TV shows, such as Kojak, and, of course, our schlubby detective himself, in book form! Columbo hit
Alright, the Columbo books are there.
Japanese TV in 1974, and its similarities to the Hokkaku style made it an instant hit. Also, anime references kind of solidify that. One of his biggest fans was none other than Shu Takumi, the creator of Ace Attorney.
When I was a kid, I used to record the audio of Columbo episodes on cassette tape and listen to them in my room.
I did the same thing with Scooby-Doo episodes, but you don't see me making Scooby-Doo Hokkaku out here. Anyways, back to Shu.
There were 12 of us my year in the consumer division alone, and one by one people got picked out for teams like Resident Evil and Breath of Fire. So half a year passed, and then a year. I stayed until the very last, watching over my seat in the training room.
Before entering the game industry, Takumi wanted to write mystery fiction, but was rejected by publishers. A friend from college told him about a game he was pitching, and Takumi decided to try. In 1994, he joined Capcom. The first game Takumi worked on was Scary Rumors at School, Hanako-san is Here, in 1995. A game about a magical ghost girl doing stuff like this. After the game was released, Takumi moved over to Shinji Mikami's production studio 4. And after wrapping up a director's stint on Dino Crisis 2, Capcom decided to give Takumi free reign to do whatever he wanted with a small team and a small budget. So he got to work on, what else? A mystery game. Takumi is a Hokaku purist at heart who looked down upon most mystery games as passive experiences. One of the exceptions to that was Myst, which didn't have the appearance of a mystery story, but successfully captured the essence of one.
How can I change the passive reading experience of detective games into one where it truly feels like you solve the mystery yourself based on your own reasoning? From there, I arrived at the idea of pointing out contradictions and utterances of other people, and that was how I first arrived at the idea of an attorney.
So yeah, this is one of the big big problems with visual novels, is how do you make the passive reading experience engaging? On stream, of course, I can read it out and do the voices, and that makes it much more interesting. But when you're just playing it yourself, there's a whole heap of other stuff that you need to see. So yeah, he started with the picking out the contradictions yourself. Yeah.
Phoenix Wright was released in 2001 on the GBA in Japan, and while it performed okay there, sales in the US were pretty dismal. Despite that, Capcom greenlit more sequels, and the series eventually gained momentum through word of mouth. Each game adds new elements to enhance the investigation and trial gameplay. But the central theme remains consistent through all 6 games in this series. It's what Takumi references as a puzzle plot mystery, where the focus is on logically and methodically solving a mystery. In his musings on mystery fiction, he brings up the idea that there are 2 roles: the great detective who figures out the truth, and the reader who is surprised by the truth. When a person watches an episode of Columbo, we're watching excellent detective work, but we don't get the satisfaction of being the reader. We're not surprised because we know the truth from the beginning by the nature of the show. Columbo is both the reader and the great detective. By contrast, in Phoenix Wright, the player takes on the role of the great detective and the reader. We're solving the case, and in doing so, we're surprised by the outcome. In Phoenix Wright, you're the Columbo of the courtroom, and the only thing you can't ask is, one more thing.
Oh, that was it? Yeah. I thought he might talk about the reader thing a little bit more. Because I feel like the figuring out which evidence to use and the logic and reasoning behind it is the part where you're the reader.